Total memory loss? Hey, wake up. You're our last chance.
Breakdown is a first-person action game that was developed and published by Namco and released on the Xbox in January of 2004. Reviews at the time were wildly mixed. The game received everything from a 5 to a 9 out of 10, and I was unaware of its existence until a few years ago, which says a lot if I'm being honest. The premise for this game is surprisingly bland when you consider everything that's involved. If I were to say to you that this title takes place in a secret scientific facility and features super soldiers and a story that also has elements of creepy hallucinations and eventually dabbles in time travel, you'd probably think that Breakdown sounds like a fun time. But even with all of those quirky elements, it still manages to be unbelievably boring. You play as Derek Cole, a man with amnesia who wakes up in a strange room and is initially being ordered to complete a number of physical tests by an unknown party who is clearly observing you for research purposes. After a day of being a guinea pig, a woman by the name of Alex shows up to kill a bunch of guards and break you out. She seems to know you, and even though your amnesia leaves you unable to recall how she knows you, the only choice you have is to trust her and try to make a break for it. As Derek and Alex try to escape the facility, it is revealed that humans are currently at war with people known as the Talon, and not only have humans been experimenting on mixing the DNA of the two races in an attempt to create super soldiers, but Derek has been injected with the Talon fluid himself and develops a number of strange powers over the course of the game. From here, the story is all over the place, and sadly none of it is exciting, but the main focus is Derek and Alex stopping the Talon threat, and even though time travel is thrown in to spice things up due to the presentation of it all, which I'll get into later, it is really hard to care about any of it. Breakdown has some interesting ideas in terms of gameplay also, but just like the story, it all falls flat. As previously mentioned, this is a first-person action game, and I say action instead of shooter because there is a mixture of shooting, melee, and special powers at play here. This all sounds great, but when you actually get a chance to play it, it's possibly one of the most awkward and clunky games I've ever encountered. Not only is the movement and camera hypersensitive and isn't much better when you turn the sensitivity down, but on top of this, the game does have a lot of things to interact with and is very heavy with its animation, so it's all a bit of a chore when you're just trying to press a button or pick up some ammo. It's clear that Namco wanted to make this an immersive game. It takes place entirely in the first-person view from Cole's perspective. There are no cutscenes at all, it just plays out in front of you, and the UI is incredibly minimal. This isn't a bad design choice for a game, it just needs to be executed in the right way, and throwing up in a toilet isn't quite that.
Now it's time to lose your lunch.
The combat works on a lock-on system. The good part about this is that it spares you from having to aim freely with the awful camera. The bad part about this is that it constantly leaves you vulnerable to any other enemy in the room as you posture yourself towards the enemy you're locked onto and turn your back to everyone else. This means that if you don't move quickly, you are most likely going to die. A lot. Fortunately, the checkpoint system is frequent, so you don't lose too much progress, but you'll certainly be playing some of the same sections quite a few times. This problem is especially evident when you're pitted against multiple Talon warriors. These enemies can't be taken down with weapons, and you have to use melee attacks, but when you focus on one enemy and the other superpowered giant shoulder barges you in the back, causing you to fall on the floor and get disoriented, you'll grow increasingly frustrated as they team up on you while you're trying to get your bearings again. I think this is possibly the biggest issue for this game. It's just not built to handle combat with more than one enemy at a time, and there isn't really a solid strategy to approaching 3 or 4 people. You basically just have to get the most out of your shield power that runs on a meter and just hope for the best. One thing that doesn't make the experience any less frustrating is the minimal UI. The only information on screen is the health bar and an indicator that shows you how far away an enemy is and how accurate your attacks will be. There is no ammo counter, and ammo is scarce enough as it is. You could wander into a fight completely unaware that you only have 1 bullet left, fire it off, and in the time it takes you to realise that you're out out of ammo and then change to another weapon or use your shield power, there is a good chance that you will have been taken down already. It seems as if the developer tried to compensate for the lack of UI by making Derek pick up every item really slow and take a look at every clip of ammo, every grenade, every health item, just to communicate what you have in your inventory. The trouble is, after every fight, you'll spend what feels like way too long slowly picking up the items one by one, meaning your time with this game will bounce between frantic and clunky and sluggish and dull. Even the powers you unlock, while useful, are still so animation heavy that they don't make this a more thrilling game. So no matter what type of combat it is, it's still just a great big yawn of a time. So let's get back to the presentation of the game that I spoke of earlier, as it's once again another area of this game that flatters to deceive. If we're talking technically, then Breakdown looks good, in terms of how sharp it looks, no ugly textures or real lack of detail to the assets. If we're talking design, then Breakdown has no character whatsoever. Not only do the numerous grey corridors look devoid of life and creativity, but they also make everything more confusing when you're trying to figure out where you need to go. It is a real wasted opportunity here because despite having a decent looking engine, the game does absolutely nothing with it, and even when things do get a little trippy and alien, it still manages to appear flavourless. Characters look fine but also generic. None of them are memorable or interesting, and everyone looks like the first stages of their concept art. Piling on more of the lifeless feel is the distinct lack of music for a lot of areas, and the voice acting adds nothing at all.
Maybe killing us wasn't his objective. Anyway, we better get out of here before we run into him again.
When I picked up Breakdown, I was hopeful. I took a look at some of the screenshots of the game and saw its sharp visuals and interesting approach to combat and thought it could be a bit of a hidden gem. It wasn't long before I realised that all of my assumptions on this title were wrong. The gameplay is a chore, the story has promise but doesn't deliver, the world it takes place in is devoid of any style or substance. Breakdown is a game that fails on multiple levels in my opinion, and sadly is a title that you should stay well away from.
You ready?